two words that came to my mind from the speech of Ted: joy and humility. And humility is actually a path to knowledge, and knowledge is a path to joy. And these are the two themes I would like to keep now for the next coming 2 days together: being humble and to learn, and to learn to enjoy. The story of this program started 7 years ago with a question coming from the Mars leadership, which is a very unusual question in the corporate world. What should be the right level of profit? It's actually not a new question. This question has been addressed by the King Solomon almost 3,000 years ago. A man may give freely and still his wealth will be increased, and another may keep back more than is right, but only comes to be in need. Am I okay for the, can you listen to me? Okay. Can you hear me better? Yes. Wonderful. Not a new question, a very old question, which actually goes through the entire history of mankind. But the question that related between these questions are the following one: profit or growth? Do you have to make a trade-off? Okay. And if profits and growth are related, which ones come first? Second one is about the optimum value sharing. Every business sits in a supply chain, and any chain is as strong as the weakest link. So when the weakest link is not being taken care of, the whole value chain can break. Third one is about the question of concentration of capital. And there are many schools of thought today about sharing value, redistributing value. I will come to that later on, but it's all about the idea, okay, does it make sense that capital is concentrated? And if it makes sense for capital to be concentrated, in what hand? This question has been responded in a very particular way over the last 50 years by the tenet of the Chicago School of Thought. The sole social responsibility of business is to maximize profit for distribution to shareholders. Yet, if you look back several thousand years ago, three inputs need remuneration. It is the planet that provides, the people that transforms, and the money that brings liquidity. Over the last 150 years, we had three schools of thought which actually addressed each of these concepts. The Marxism, which wanted to remunerate the people at the expense of the two. The modern capitalism, which is all about maximizing profit and remunerating capital at the expense of people and planet. And the ecology are in the mind of remunerating the land, the planet, at the expense of people and also the capital. And each one of the school of thought actually is very seducing, because each one of them has a component of the truth. And a half-truth is actually more deceitful than a true lie. What we need is a new mutual capitalism, which would holistically, it's a new word I learned a couple of days ago, holistically optimize the value of all three. And at Mars, we call it economics of mutuality.
Is my mic on? Yep, there we go. Great. I love to talk about this topic. So just spend a couple of minutes and start with the question of why now? So I mean, for everything there is a season. You've probably heard that comment before. And for me, looking at economics and trying to understand it, I think of it as nothing more or less than the management of scarcities. So if you go back 40, 50 years ago, the Earth had one real major form of scarcity, which was financial capital. But labor was abundant, natural resources were abundant. So of course, economics came into play. Milton Friedman showed up on the scene riding a white horse for some and created a business model, financial capitalism, that was meant to address this form of scarcity. Well, here we are 40, 50 years down the road, and that model has been tremendously successful at generating massive amounts of financial capital to the extent that there's maybe too much financial capital in the system. And yet we have natural resources that are being depleted at a rate beyond which the Earth can replenish them. And you could also argue that there's a scarcity now in terms of labor, but in the form of talent match, not the right match of talent for the jobs that are being created. And yet we still have this model that's generating more and more dysfunction. So nature of scarcity has changed, model is the same. For me, that kind of answers, in many ways, the why now question. So I think what we're here to talk about is the need for a new model to create value in the context of these new forms of scarcity. And this is really going to take a paradigm shift, I think. So this conference is about the role of responsible business. So I think about the responsible manager in business, but I also think about the responsible academic in this kind of a partnership in the context of responsible business. So business is really the growing force in the world in so many ways. The power of business has, in many ways, eclipsed that of government. There are some corporations, actually, that have more revenue than the GDP of some countries. And so does that not make us responsible, as responsible managers, for thinking and acting with this power beyond the single-mindedness of Milton Friedman's quote that Bruno showed, which was, I think, a paraphrase about the sole social responsibility of business being to maximize profit for distribution to shareholders. I think we've evolved beyond that now with the power that's wielded by corporations and the responsibility that comes with it. And yet businesses are not well equipped to take on that new mission. It's difficult to understand and just difficult to grasp the tools that are necessary to do those things. So you also, I think it's really important to remember that in this life, we often stand where we sit. So there's definitely a role for charity. There's definitely a role for foundations. There's a role for NGOs. There's a role for everyone in this. But for business, good business needs to be good for business, for it to be transformational for businesses, for businesses actually to feel the pull of this model and to adopt this new approach, or a new approach that actually becomes more responsible on a wide enough scale to transform everything in business. So the role of the academic, so what is the responsible academic in this kind of a partnership? I think of the old adage, my people are destroyed from lack of knowledge. And business often lacks the knowledge that academia has. And I think in business, for academics, the responsibility now extends also to teach beyond Milton Friedman's sole social responsibility of business to maximize shareholder profit. And for both business and academia, it often starts at measurement. So maybe this could be a point of entry as we seek to figure out how to combine what business has and academics don't, and what academics have in terms of the knowledge that business needs. So maybe that point of entry could potentially be measurement and metrics, which my colleague Bruno will talk about in just a moment in greater detail. And Catalyst, the unit that I'm really privileged to be in, this internal think tank and this very sort of strange role inside a corporation that we have the privilege to play, has played the role of a bridge at Mars for many years between this world of big ideas that are maybe very abstract in academia and business practical application, and trying to figure out how do we bring one to the other and back again. So we're here today because we're partnering business with academia at the Saïd Business School, and we're designing together and testing new metrics and piloting that in live business situations. And it's important to know that this is not about new CSR metrics to report on business activities or aspirations. There are plenty of those metrics already. We don't need to invent new ones. There are some good and there are some not so good in that space. But rather what we're trying to do with this program is to look at people and planet metrics that actually can drive business performance in a more holistic way. So what we're trying to do in essence, as I tried to think about this yesterday in preparing this brief comments, is that what we're trying to do here is to try to take business beyond the single focus of maximizing one form of capital, which is financial, for profit. So in a sense, what we're doing is experimenting with ways in which capitalism maybe can be completed. And that, for me, makes this job truly one that's vocational. And I really feel privileged to be able to work on it. Bruno?
Well, thank you, Jay. So remember the three questions we had at the beginning. Profit or growth? Is this a debate? Is there a trade-off? Value, optimum value sharing, and eventually concentration of capital. The whole purpose of economics of mutuality is to come up with a new answer to these questions, and in such a way that it transforms the way business operates and restore the restorative power of business. In any business, as Jay said, it would start with the management of performance and therefore with the metrics. And what we're going to share with you in the next couple of slides is an attempt not to invent new metrics to report business activities on people and environment, but the other way around, is that new metrics, non-financial metrics, people and planet metrics, that can drive business performance holistically and also can be used to measure that performance across the board. And we called it social capital, human capital, natural capital, and shared financial capital. And the word capital here is important because as a business, we need this different form of capital. Maybe we need more form of capital, but at least we have identified these 4 forms of capital to run any business effectively. And the purpose of business is not only to make money with money, okay? It's about to enhance, mobilize, enhance, nurture these 4 forms of capital. And the question we have is that whether if you do it, do you end up with a business model that is superior in terms of value creation than the profit maximization or not? This is just the question that we're trying to ask in the coming days. And if we have the means to measure this performance across the board, what are the management practices that we need to invent to do this? Because in traditional management, we know how to make money with money. We have this muscle extremely well developed in our organizations. But when it comes to make social capital programs or human capital programs or natural capital programs, it requires to flex new muscles. We have these muscles in our organizations. We just don't use them. And when we use new muscles, and I know there are many sports people here, it hurts. It's painful. It is there, but it's painful. Okay. It's painful, but it's good at the same time because you feel you're alive and you are exerting some new strengths in your organization, but it is painful. And these new businesses that can drive performance holistically, it's all about driving financial and non-financial performance simultaneously. So it's not about making money one way, okay, and then spend that money, put it in a fund or a foundation, and do good. This is a very good model, but it's not the model that we're interested in here. We're interested in a model that can deliver the non-financial and the financial performance simultaneously. How you do this? Well, what we are learning, and there are some case studies later on today that my colleague from Mark will present, is that it requires to go beyond the traditional boundaries of the firm. It requires to take advantage of what Colin said, these externalities, and turn them into positive internalities. And it's not a bit complex, but it's very simple. Sometimes it just means that, for instance, in a business we tested in Kenya with a Wrigley segment, it means just making very unusual partnership with sport organizations, with religious organizations. It's making partnership with non-traditional business partners. And this is how eventually you can tap into the social capital that this organization can have and can invest into a business program. The only issue here is to ensure that we are aligned on the purpose level and that we are measuring performance properly in order to ensure that mutuality is delivered at every level of the organization. So we started the journey, as I said at the beginning, 7 years ago, with this very unusual question. And I'm glad, actually, that this question was asked. And I would just say a few words that when we started the journey, to my surprise and to the surprise of the team, this question of what should be the right level of profit is a blind spot in the literature. And it still is today. Okay? So it means we have to approach this field with a great level of humility, but also of curiosity, because there is something to be found there. And on that journey over the last 7 years, we discovered a few very interesting principles, very interesting insights, which I'm going to share with you today. And of course, there is much more literature behind it. So please feel free to come back to us if you want to know more after the conference. The first one is that it's possible to measure the social, human, and natural capital with metrics that are simple and that are generic. And when I say generic, I don't say universal, because we don't know yet. But we tested this concept across different geographies. In Papua New Guinea, among coffee farmers. In the slums outside Nairobi, among slum dwellers. In the Philippines, among cocoa farmers in Ivory Coast. And it is the same metrics that actually explain the social and human capital. So there is an element here of almost like discovering a natural law. It's possible to measure this non-financial capital with the same level of simplicity and actionability than we have for financial capital. This is the first insight, which is very, very important because you don't need a PhD in sociology to understand social capital. You just need to be smart MBAs, okay? It's good enough. The second thing which was important is that, and I remember on this journey I had many friends at Mars who said to me, oh, so what? So what social capital? So what human capital? Well, what we discovered on this journey is that there is a high level of correlation between the social capital and human capital in particular and the performance, the economic performance financially that exists in the ecosystem. And that was a second insight that was very interesting, which means that in terms of business performance, business practices, that it's possible for a business to invest in social capital strategies, in human capital strategies, and do good financially, do well financially. And to me, it reminds me the evolution of business. 50 years ago, we didn't need to have a marketing function. Okay? It was just enough to produce and to sell. And eventually, about 40 years ago, people invented the concept of branded good, of branded business. And all of a sudden, we had to flex new muscles. We had to bring artists, we had to bring agencies, we had to bring media people to build brands. Okay? And now we are manufacturing business, selling business, but also branded business. Our vision is that what you're talking about here is exactly the same line. In the future, companies will have to know how to invest in social capital and human capital, natural capital strategies for the good of their business. It is a new muscles, it is a new practice, but it's exactly why we are here today, because it is something we can develop together between academics and businesses. So what are the implications? The implication, I think, is that there is a new breed of entrepreneurs that are willing to operate beyond financial capital, that are willing to test new strategies to develop social capital and human capital, natural capital strategies. It's also a new breed of academics who are willing to research and teach beyond one form of capital. And we need to bridge the two. And we need to bridge the two not only between one company, Mars, one academic institution, Oxford, but it's more about a movement that we are calling here. Because again, it's all about knowledge. And knowledge is not something, it's a non-rival good. You want to share knowledge. Because when you share knowledge, it increases. But you want to share knowledge with individuals and organizations that have the same purpose. Is it new? Well, it's a very ancient concept, which goes back 3,000 years ago, even more, called the Jubilee. And the Jubilee is a concept by which you release the people from overwork and from slavery. You release the land from overwork, for overuse, and you release the money, the capital, from over-accumulation and debt. And the fundamental concept of the Jubilee is to ensure that the capital is concentrated in the right hands. And what are the right hands that have the legitimacy to concentrate capital? These are the entrepreneurs. And there is the same proportion of entrepreneurs in every population. There is the same level of entrepreneurs in every population. Entrepreneurship is a gift that is given across mankind. And what we have discovered in our journey is that you have a lot of entrepreneurs in the slums of Nairobi or Manila. But the environment that surrounds these entrepreneurs is not conducive for them to express their entrepreneurship. And these entrepreneurs actually are being revealed, and they have this talent of mobilizing the social capital of the community, the human capital of their fellow friends, and also generating financial capital that can reinvest. And if you have this level of entrepreneurship at the base, at the bottom of the pyramid, our vision is that it is a natural law that expands throughout the pyramid of income. It's not also new, because at Mars, it was of the foundational principle. In 1947, the founder of the company, Forrest Mars Sr., wrote this letter to all the employees, and he reminded that the sole purpose of the company is to drive a mutuality, to promote a mutuality of benefit among a list of stakeholders. And you can see actually that the shareholders are at the bottom. And today, along with 4 other principles, which we called at Mars the 5 principle, mutuality is one of the core distinctive principles that drives the way we do business. So it's not new. So what is new? Okay. Well, today there are many initiatives in that space called inclusive capitalism, creating shared value, conscious capitalism. So what is it new in what we say? I think the new frontier stands in 3 concepts. First of all, here we are talking of new metrics, not CSR metrics to measure the impact of business on society or planet, but new metrics that drive performance. It is the other way around. The second thing is that we are talking of new management practices to make it happen. And what is new also is that we are intentional with Oxford and other academic institutions to frame this experience into a very solid academic framework, so that a theory could be enacted in such a way that it can grow based on business practices, but also it can grow throughout academic institutions. And over the next day, we will review a number of case studies, and our challenge is for you to say, okay, to what extent the management practices that will be presented through the next 10 case studies, to what extent do they fit with the vision that a business can be a force, a powerful force to restore and to bring value to people and planet. You want to say something, Jane? Yeah.
So just in closing, is my mic on? Yep. Just in closing for me, I just wanted to refer back to the way Ted started us. He used 2 great words, I think, which were humility on the one hand and joy on the other. This is really meaningful to me personally, but also to our team in this journey, because we don't pretend that we have all the answers. And it gives me great joy to work collaboratively and to try to learn from one another on this journey. So one of the things I wanted just to raise with all of you to think about as we go through the different case studies and the different experts who are going to be speaking over the course of these next 2 days is whether coming back to this concept of bridging big academic knowledge with practical business application in a way in which we can all become more responsible is to think about whether you might want to join in this journey with us as well, in humility and joy as we try to seek the answers of how to do business in a different way. And I'm very inspired, almost every day actually, I think about something that our former CEO, Paul Michaels, who's retired now, once said when we did some research for a couple of years in this space at the very beginning. Bruno said we've been working on this for 7 years, and it's very truthful, we have been. And after the first couple of years, we brought our findings to Paul, and we said, okay, this is what we've come up with so far. And we knew that this was a moment in time in which he was going to make a decision, kind of go or no go. Are we going to invest in this or not? And I'm going to paraphrase what he said, because I don't remember the exact words, but what he said is pretty clear in my mind. And he said that economics of mutuality, which is what we were calling our research, is not about competitive advantage, but to be competitive in the future, businesses are going to have to work this way. And that was a big kind of endorsement for this work, I think. And for me, it gave me more of a purpose in the work, that I knew it wasn't just about finding a new way to maximize profit. It really was about thinking much more broadly about being responsible and actually being holistically sustainable as corporations going in the future. So I'll just leave you with that and look forward to the rest of this day.